Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Thank you so much for joining me again today. For those of you who enjoy listening to our podcast, please give us a ratings and review on Apple Podcasts. And for those who'd like to see a video version, please go to my YouTube page. And if you go to my website, drweitz.com, you can find detailed show notes and a complete transcript. Today, our topic is how to improve bone density with osteogenic loading with Dr. John Jaquish. We have recently focused on osteoporosis in episode 164 with Dr. Lanny Simpson, and we explored some of the most effective diet, lifestyle, supplements, and medications for improving bone density and bone health. Osteoporosis is a major health issue affecting 44 million Americans over the age of 50. Osteoporosis can lead to fractures that can be disastrous for our health, especially hip fractures, which result in death in 24% within 1 year of the fracture. Dr. John Jaquish, our guest today, has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and he's the inventor of Osteostrong, which are wellness centers utilizing medical devices that can reverse osteoporosis and create more powerful fracture-resistant athletes. He's recently partnered with Tony Robbins to help market his centers. Members go through a 4-device circuit that takes approximately 10 minutes and done once per week has been shown to significantly increase bone density up to 14% in 1 year. Most other scientific studies have failed to show a consistent increase in bone density with conventional weight training. In fact, according to Dr. Jaquish, conventional weightlifting is a waste of time, as is traditional cardiovascular training like biking or running. Dr. Jaquish is also a research professor at Rushmore University, and he speaks around the world. Dr. Jaquish, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe you can start by telling us about how your desire to help your mother got you started on this topic of improving bone density.
I did it for my mother, yes. She was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and she was pretty distraught because she was prescribed some of the medications and she didn't like the side effects she read about. And neither did I. But she said, this is just going to totally limit my life. And she felt like she was too young to just sit at home and watch everybody, run past the window. Because it was going to be something that she believed would change the quality of her life just for fear of fracture.
How old was your mom at that time?
She was in her 60s.
Okay.
Yeah, in mid-late 60s. But she was very active. Like, she played tennis and she hiked a lot. And I mean, like, not just walking around the yard, like 15-mile hikes.
Right.
Or like a real hiker. So I saw her just like having to go through the mental exercise of just giving up on everything she liked. And I didn't like that at all. So I said, maybe there's a population out there that has figured out how to get their bone to respond. And by getting bone to respond, like past childhood, being able to really build a serious amount of bone mass. And so I said, let me look into this. And of course, she had nothing to do. So she was like, yeah, sure. Go ahead. And so I did. And I found those super responders, it's gymnasts. And they build bone density very high levels. Now, they also fracture a lot of bones because they're going through high impact. They hit the ground with sometimes 10 times their body weight.
A lot of joint injuries, too, because my daughter was a gymnast from age 4.
Sure. Yeah, there's probably some of your patients are probably past gymnasts who have all kinds of lifetime injuries that they got when they were teenagers or even younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an unfortunate part of the sport, but it has allowed us to learn a lot. Unfortunately, the amount of research that has been compiled on high impact is plentiful. I mean, it's in the thousands of studies, very obvious what impact does. But of course, that's the opposite of what's recommended by most physicians. Most physicians say, well, resistance exercise is good. That's a really irresponsible recommendation because there's no dosage associated with it. So like, aspirin is good for headaches. Well, how much? 5 milligrams or 5,000? Well, 5 milligrams will do nothing. 5,000 will kill you. But 350, that works for almost everybody. So having a dosage associated with a recommendation is very important. So when looking through all of the data, I thought, nobody wants older people to go through high impact type exercise. But what if I were to create a series of medical devices that would give the benefit of high impact without the risks? So like, for example, being in an isolated position where I'm just in the position I would naturally absorb high impact. So I'm going to trip and fall. I'm not going to try and brace myself like this. I'm going to be about right here, 120-degree angle of inclusion from upper arm to lower arm. So if I'm in that position and I can brace for that impact, I can handle far more than my body weight. Sometimes 4 or 5, when we're talking about my legs, 10 times my body weight. So, and as soon as I made that discovery that, this was just through trial and error, that even untrained athletes could hold 5, 6 times their body weight, I thought, wow, we can build a device that will trigger bone growth in the body based on the process that's supposed to happen physiologically, but doesn't because of our avoidance of high impact. So prototype these devices, treated my mother with the prototypes. Within 18 months, she had the bones of a 30-year-old. And she was back to a T-score of just under 0. She never quite got to 0, and she's hovering around there now. And she's in her mid-80s.
And her original T-score was what?
Negative 2.5. Read the diagnosis level.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and within 18 months, it was totally reversed. So, like I said, there's thousands of studies that talk about the force that's associated with impact, but then the studies sort of conclude, but these forces aren't practical for anyone other than, a high performance athlete. Untrue. It's just the way they're applied. So that's what the devices at Osteostrong do. They are incredibly effective. They're incredibly quick. It takes just a few minutes to go through the protocol. You can only go through it once a week because bone has a very different metabolic rate than musculature or your lungs or whatever, like from a different kind of exercise, though we don't call it exercise. So
are they going through a short range of motion, or are they just holding a one position?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of people who don't really look at the technology thoroughly make the mistake and call it isometrics. It is not, because there is a range of motion, but the range of motion comes from the compression of bone.
Aren't you compressing the joints too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. And then the joints adapt also based on what we learn from the Benjamin and Ralph's study in 1996. You put axial compression through a joint, which is where the joint is the most optimized, and you grow. There's fibrocartilage growth that thicken the tendons and ligaments around the joint capsule. So making the joint stronger, more powerful. And that even somebody who's bone on bone, they're still going to be bone on bone, but they're going to have a better supported joint, and that can cut down on their pain.
Now, it's not really physiological in the sense that normally, you would sit down and you would stand up or you would push yourself away. You normally using your muscles through a range of motion when you're doing activities, and weight training is really designed to duplicate some of those normal activities, but this is
not at all. When you move something, like if you watch movers, like guys who professionally move stuff, they don't use a full range of motion. They're trying to be efficient with the way they move their body. They're not going to like squat all the way down when they go to pick up the piano to make sure they get a full range of motion. That is not how we functionally move at all. But in fact, if you look at a runner, if you look at a sprinter, you use 7 degrees of flexion behind your knee where you have 180 degrees available. Why don't you use 180 while you sprint? Because you wouldn't go anywhere. That's why. So it's like full range. Now, full range has its place for sure.
I mean, if you were a football player and you were kneeling down and then you're coming up, to block somebody, you're going through starting maybe in a deep squat and coming up and pushing and no,
you would use your strongest range only. I train over 10 NFL players with my other product. And no, that full range of motion is nonsensical to athletes and to functional movement. Now, sometimes we go to a deeper range of motion, like getting off the toilet for activities of daily living for elderly people.
Right.
That's like you have that discussion with your patients all day long because, somebody has a knee injury, like, getting off the toilet, it's like got a little harder. And, they're talking to you about it. How do I improve the joint health? How do I activities of daily living, full range of motion. But if you're looking at performance movements, not at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, when patients get loaded on these machines, do you start at a lower level and gradually increase it?
The computer system is actually capturing their output. So it's whatever force they create. And we measure the force that they create. So nothing is being placed on the body. The body's creating the force and compressing its own bone mass and joints.
Huh.
That way we let, instead of like trying to have some software system that's trying to outsmart your injury potential, which has never worked in human history. We use neural inhibition as the limiter. So if something becomes uncomfortable, even unconsciously uncomfortable, your body starts to shut the muscles down. And so you get to the maximum output every time. And as the bone mass adapts week by week, that number goes up and up and up.
So can the average 70-year-old person produce 4 times their body weight in force?
Sometimes they have to build up to it. 70, usually they're right around the minimum dose response because it's 4.2 actually in the hip joint that it takes to begin growing bone. But they usually exceed that within 2 or 3 weeks.
It's interesting. I'm used to seeing people every once in a while. You see somebody at the gym when the gyms were open doing a leg press and they're just doing a really short range of motion. And it's funny. I've always thought, oh man, that dude is kidding himself. He's not doing anything.
Right.
But he's in that, short range of motion. He may actually be increasing his bone density.
Yeah, it's possible. It takes a lot of weight to do it. And usually when people are doing that, they're just sort of fooling themselves into thinking that they're really strong.
Right.
People are like, oh yeah, is that what they're doing? And I'm like, I don't think they know what they're doing. But could they be getting a bone density benefit? Yes, they could be.
So for participants who go through your Osteostrong centers, they do that once a week. What other types of exercise do you recommend for them?
really nothing.
What about, say, balance training, since we know a lot of people, fall and break bones?
Balance training is a part of the Osteostrong protocol.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Because it kind of goes hand in hand. If you want to, there's avoiding the fracture by avoiding the fall. So that is part of the protocol. But,
so do they do that at the Osteostrong Center, or they do balance exercises at home?
No, they do it at Osteostrong.
Oh, okay. What kind of balance exercises do you use?
They do. It depends. Like that protocol changes a little bit. You want them to feel slightly off balance, but you don't want them to actually fall. So there's a bar in front of them that they hang on to, and they stand on a vibratory platform. Whole body vibration, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about that alone as improving bone density?
Yeah, that's a falsehood, because, and that's been disproven many times. There's actually a great piece of research from a Canadian university that shows that vibration does nothing. Basically, for bone density, it does plenty for balance. It does plenty for activating musculature, especially in the deconditioned. But what they did when the first vibration platforms came out, I actually know the guy who came up with this kind of scam. I mean, it really irritates me, because this is why when you come up with something new in physical medicine, that it's so scrutinized. It's because there's so many scams out there. Alkaline water, it was going to cure everything, except it really doesn't do anything. At least as far as any research goes, are we going to discover later that it does something else? Maybe, but thus far, nothing. What they did was they played a game with some of the mathematics of the acceleration. That's what they would call it. They would always reference the acceleration, how the thing would go up and down. And it went up and down at 15 miles an hour, and your body having to be put under that impact, you're getting 6 times your body weight. But the amplitude is so minimal, you're basically just compressing your skin. It's less than I think it's like a millimeter at the most. Most of them are half a millimeter. So it's not getting into your bone, because all of your other tissues are absorbing that force. So when it comes to your bone's not getting anything. So they basically just sort of lied with math and said this is going to increase bone density. But then whenever it was trialed by somebody other than, a company, it didn't do anything.
Now, what goes into fracture risk is not just bone density, but we also have bone quality, the ability of bone to flex, for example.
Sure.
Do your machines improve bone quality as well as bone density?
Yes, that's harder to measure. Now, ours, Osteostrong focuses mostly on trabecular bone. So you'll see a bone density change within 6 months or a year. And then you'll see an even greater change, because typically a DEXA scan is looking at the outer cortex, not the outer cortex really, and the inner. The middle of the bone is where the newer cells, the newer bone cells are, and they're the ones that are absorbing minerals. So the outer cortex just is like the old bone that's it's not dead tissue just yet, but it's right before it's metabolized. So it's compact and it's on the outside, and it's the strongest part of the bone, but that's not where the growth happens.
Yeah, I guess according to Dr. Simpson, I haven't performed this test yet, but some of the labs that do the bone density can also give you a trabecular bone score, which is supposed to be a measure of bone quality.
Yes. Yeah, trabecular is much more in the quality category.
Yeah, I guess if they have a certain software, they can compute this.
Yeah.
So I looked at some of the literature related to being able to increase bone density. I did see a trial called the Lift More trial in 2017.
Out of Australia.
Yeah. It showed that heavyweight training using like 5 rep max, squat, deadlift, overhead press, plus they had them jump onto a chin-up bar and then drop down, did improve bone density.
Yeah, the only thing that did anything was falling off the chin-up bar. Because that's where they're getting the impact. That's where they're getting, the hitting the ground. And because no one's, like, we already know, and it's been shown in multiple studies of very high quality. And this study was more of a exercise science study. So it was pretty low quality, very low sample size, not a lot of controls. The methods section was not well documented. Nutrition wasn't even recorded. So, okay, well, it's a typical exercise science study, because I don't like holding studies to a standard of like what we would see in therapy or what we would see, with something you find in the European Journal of Sports Medicine necessarily, because usually it's a smaller study that stimulates a bigger one. But having said that, we know 4.2 multiples body weight is what's required. We know that from big studies, like awesome studies that were published in top journals. And so they added impact in with a bunch of weightlifting, and they say weightlifting works. Well, we could do something health focused with cocaine users, and then, say cocaine makes you healthy. No, it doesn't. It gives you like permanent cardiac damage every time you screw around with it. So it's just one of those things where
that's a bit of a stretch for an analogy.
But everyone will get it. Everyone who listens to this will be like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that would be obvious.
Right.
There's a great study that was done for basically comedic purposes for researchers, where they determined that jumping out of an airplane with a parachute versus not having a parachute with you does not increase your chances of survival. So parachutes are useless. I'm not kidding. They actually did this. But when you read the conclusion, and it's just like, you would think people were just jumping out of airplanes and just, like tumbling while they land. And it's like, all right, guess you can just jump off of anything and you won't get hurt. But when you read the method section, they did this study while the plane was on the ground. So parachute or no parachute, it didn't even open. It just jumped from the airplane to the asphalt, to the tarmac. And the point was, this is how people get misled. This is why when you read something and, like, even like the New York Times, like the health reporter isn't really familiar with what they're talking about, and they like read the wrong sentence and misinterpret it. And then that becomes the new reality for most people. It's like, are vegetables good or are vegetables bad? Well, it's just not that simple. Sorry. I mean, how many patients come into your office and they really want like health summarized into like a meme, a sentence fragment. And it's like, I'm sorry, it's just not that simple. You should probably, they still write books for a reason. It's because memes don't tell you the whole story, and usually they're wrong. Right? Like, I mean, how many times, I bet you every day you tell somebody you should read this book or you should read that book, right?
Sure.
Because it's just not that simple. And so,
and the science changes over time. And
so I think like the Lift More study, like, it's like they proved my point. It's like, oh, we're going to do all this weight training, and then we're going to do this thing that's just like osteogenic loading, and then say weight training works.
So you think if they did the 5 rep max squat, deadlift, press, it wouldn't have shown an increase in bone density?
I can show you 50 studies that'll give you exactly that.
Where they use the 5 rep max? And
maybe not all of them. Maybe some of them were 10 reps, some of them were 1 rep. Doesn't matter. You know that 4.2 is a minimum dose response. You know that some of the strongest people in the world don't squat with 4.2 times their body weight. You also know that a leg sled, you're only getting like 40% of the weight because it's at an angle, and most of the weight is being driven into the floor. So yeah, people are like, oh yeah, leg press 1,000 pounds. And I'm like, okay. You know, people push cars, you know, when their cars run out of gas.
Yeah.
Car weighs 3,500 pounds. It doesn't mean they can bench press 3,500 pounds.
Right.
Right. They just got to break the inertia and it'll just go on flat ground. And you can do it with 100 pounds, 50 pounds.
Right. So you also think cardiovascular exercise is a waste of time?
Yeah. So the title of my book is Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. And so is cardio. There's a better way to get the body you want. Now, there's a lot of caveats to that. And I wanted a title that got attention, and it sure did. Yeah, I win. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, USA Today bestseller, and also an Amazon bestseller. Not that that really means much.
No, I think that's a big deal these days. It really
well, what people do is they'll write a book and then put it in the category of like gardening tool buyer's guides 2020. And then it's a bestseller. Like, yeah, Amazon's got a lot of categories. So, but I actually was number one for, I think it's only been out 3 weeks. I think we've been number one the entire 3 weeks, including like the first hour we put it up on Amazon for the subject of weight training, for the subject of fitness and exercise. Or maybe it's exercise and fitness, however they word it. Right. So yeah, it was big everywhere. So I sold, tens of thousands of copies.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's doing. I mean, we may be past like 50,000 at this point. So why? Like,
yeah,
why?
I mean, it certainly got my attention, and I've been lifting weights for more than 40 years. So
sure. So just very briefly, because I don't want to run us out of time. And I know you have more questions. Weightlifting is a waste of time because what I demonstrated was that what you can hold here and what you hold here is 7 times difference. So if you have 7-fold greater the capacity, why would you ever lift with a static weight?
But the muscles used change. I mean, there's more pecs at the bottom. You switch over to front delt and you switch to a lot of tricep at the end. So if you're not going all the way down, you're not fully working your pecs, I would say. Sounds like you disagree with that, but.
All the way down. I mean,
whatever range of motion you're going to have. I usually don't go below this plane. But
no, we use a full range of motion. I mean, Osteostrong doesn't, but
right.
in the book, which is mostly about why I departed from weightlifting. I always thought it was inefficient. It just bugged me. Like every time I would lift weights, I'd be like, there's a better way to do this. And
I don't know. I just lifted weights this morning. I felt great after doing it, but
you'll feel even better if you do it right. Physiologically, so I take it you have not read the book.
I did.
Oh, you did read the book? Okay.
Yeah.
So you know that every time scientists trial variable resistance, it grows more muscle and builds more strength than standard weightlifting. That was chapter 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you have the weight change as you move,
right. You're saying it gets harder as you go through the range, so you want the resistance to increase as you go through the range.
Well, it gets easier when you go through the range of motion. So bench press,
you can handle more load. Right. So you want the load to increase. Yeah.
Right. So you really want a high load where you're capable of handling it, and a lower load to still exhaust the muscle, but also be easier on the joint, because the joint grows based on the force you place on it close to lockout. Back to the Benjamin and Ralph study in 1996. So, like, the joints don't need a full range. They need impact range, which is very small. The rest of the musculature definitely benefits from a full range of motion. So we do use a full range of motion. And especially when it comes to sarcoplasmic growth. Like, there's two types of muscle growth, myofibril and sarcoplasmic.
Yeah, people have kind of toyed with this idea for a number of years. There were some selectorized machines that had a funny shaped cam to try to change the resistance during different ranges. And I've certainly seen people doing, say, a bench press with chains on, and as they lift more, the chains get heavier as they go towards the lockout, and even using bands. So people have been toying with this idea of changing the resistance as you go through the range.
They have been. Typically, they break world records if they do it right. That's really how Westside Barbell, that's the secret to their success, is using different methods, and they have very complicated apparatus, which, it's one gym, and there's more than 200 world records broken out of that one gym. One gym, one location.
Where is that gym?
It's a suburb in Ohio, and I always
okay
never get the name of the town right. Yeah. So they were doing it, and it's kind of anecdotal information, but I approached it from the data I had, where I could demonstrate that somebody's so much more powerful in the impact rating range of motion. And so the previous approaches to variance would be like, I got X at the bottom and 1.2X at the top, where I'm like, no. What we need is X at the bottom and 5X at the top. And I think the 13th study I described in the book in the variable resistance chapter, in chapter 2, they demonstrate how the greater degree of variance that they tested. Now, they didn't go quite as high as I did because I had the bone density data to know exactly how far to go. They didn't. So they demonstrated that the more variance and less actual weight you're lifting, like they'd have weights and then they'd add bands on a bar.
Right.
But the less weight and the more bands, the more growth, because they had a higher variance curve, because it is a very steep curve, what we have. And it's not linear at all. It goes like this, because it's not like X at the bottom, like, let's say we're using 5X at the top. It's not 2.5 in the middle. It's like X, 1.5X, 5X at the top. So, we're designed the whole product, the X-ray product, to get as close as possible to those curves with a very simple and elegant design.
And so you also think cardio is a waste of time as well?
Depends what your goals are. If your goal is to be a distance runner, no, it's great.
What about overall health?
You get a better cardiovascular benefit from strength training. And there's more than 100 studies that say that. And the meta-analysis that references the 100 studies is referenced in the book, as well as a few others. Some of the highlights that really show you can build as good or better cardiovascular health with strength training. Now, the real reason I say cardio is a waste of time is because most people's goal is losing weight. And when you do sustained cardio, and this research has been out there for 40 years, when you do sustained cardio, and what I mean is over 20 minutes at a similar heart rate. So as in
low intensity, steady state exercise.
Yeah, that's right. You surge cortisol and you keep it high for a long period of time. So cortisol does two things. It gets rid of muscle, and it ensures that you keep body fat longer. and don't metabolize body fat, and instead metabolize muscular tissue. So you're losing muscle and you're preserving your body fat. That seems to be the opposite of what people want. You're just staying fatter longer, which is why when you look at distance runners, they're skinny fat. You know, they're not lean. You look at sprinters and they're lean. No, they might be bigger muscular wise, might not be everybody's goal. But, you know, if you want to be a distance runner, you got to run distance and your body will adapt. And you also have to consider the fact that the body is making decisions based on the environment it's being placed in, like with all exercise. So if you're trying to show your body that you want to go long distances, your central nervous system is like an engineering team. So it realizes you're trying to become an economy car. So what do we know about economy cars? Lightweight frame. So you start losing bone density, and people who do a lot of cardio, they lose bone density. And so they have a lighter frame, which makes sense. And cortisol is going to increase the storage, is in preserve body fat, because if you want to go long distances, you got to be efficient. You got to carry a lot of fuel with you. So that becomes body fat. And you don't see many V12 engines in economy cars. So it's going to shrink the engine too. So you're going to lose muscle. So you lose muscle, you keep all your body fat, you lose bone density. That has a tendency of shortening people's lives. I just think it's a mess. Just don't do it. Also, I tell you, loving this. The myth that strength athletes have poor cardiovascular endurance really has to do with what is the test and is it the right test. So for example, like you ever been to Munich airport, you got to run up and down the stairs like 4 times and go through immigration, get your check bag and bring that through, like an examination, stall where they never really examine your bag, just wave you through. But you're running up and down stairs like 4 times. It's crazy. Terrible design of an airport, which is really weird because the Germans design everything great, except for the Munich airport. So I'm with this guy who probably weighs 100 pounds less than me. I'm 240 pounds. He's a really slim guy. And we're running up and down the stairs because we're trying to get a connecting flight to Moscow. I'm like out of breath after running up 4 flights of stairs. And he goes, "Oh man, your cardio is really not very good." And I said, "No, my legs are 4 times bigger than yours. Blood has to pump to my quadriceps, which are tremendous. Yours are not. So it's like, does the Lamborghini burn more fuel than the Prius? Yeah, it does. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the gas. It's just a different machine." And so that's kind of where that myth comes from, that like a strength athlete won't have as good a cardio health.
Okay.
And like I said, there's 100 studies that back that up.
What nutritional approaches do you think are most effective for improving bone mass?
High levels of animal protein, really. I know that there's
Won't too much animal protein leach calcium out of the bones?
No. I mean, never been shown in a real research study, but it has been. So there's a meta-analysis that compares vegan and vegetarian nutrition, to a more what they call balanced diet, which it's all epidemiology research. So what do people eat? And what do they tell you they eat? Might not be exactly.
Food frequency questionnaires, which are often unreliable.
Right. Well, it's like you have it when a patient walks in and you ask them how much they weigh. No, you weigh them because they won't tell you. They'll tell you what they weighed in high school. Right? Yeah, they do it. It's wishful thinking. It's like, well, I'm on a diet, so in 2 weeks I'm going to weigh this. Yeah, but that's not what you weigh now.
So besides a high animal protein diet, is there anything else you recommend? Do you recommend green vegetables, vitamin D, vitamin K, calcium, magnesium?
Because of the inflammation. So I look at a lot of vegetable. Did you read the nutrition section of the book?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I prefer carnivore nutrition. So heavy animal protein, the vitamin K and the vitamin D, you're getting it. You're getting a lot of, now there's a difference between grass-fed meats and farm,
Right.
factory raised.
Right.
You can always get the same. Throwing a little organ meats in there pretty much gives you every vitamin and mineral. I usually have liver like once a week. I don't emphasize it as much as like Dr. Paul Saladino. He's in organ meats daily. I think that's, like ultimately, like if you look at a cow, it's got 500 pounds of muscle meat and 2 pounds of like organ meat.
Right.
So, if you eat in that proportion, it's like a 1 to 250 pound ratio. It's not a lot of organ meat, but it's there. So, the people who do the best and build the most bone mass, they have a lot of animal protein. And like I said, oxalates in vegetables are inflammatories. So we know the lower your inflammation is, the more your bone mass can build. And so I really don't recommend many vegetables at all. Doesn't mean people can't eat them. And it's not like an either or. Like the NFL guys and the NBA guys, I talked to them about carnivore nutrition. I talked to their nutritionists about carnivore nutrition. I sent them all copies of the book. A lot of them I sent advanced copies of the book because, I even got the Miami Heat's endorsement on the back of the book. They've shifted most of these athletes to about 70% animal protein, as opposed to, the standard Western diet is 70% plant-based. So it's really the observation. It's funny. It's 70% plant-based right now. And like we were just laughing about, like epidemiology, we don't really know much from it, but we know what people buy. And chances are if they buy it, they eat it. So about 70% of the calories that are purchased are plant-based. Now, plant-based is also a Twinkie. That came from plants, which, like Oreo cookies. I know vegans will eat 3 or 4 sleeves of Oreos right in front of me. And they're like, well, they're vegan. Like they don't have any. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like poison. And it's not like they have one. They just, eat a box. But they think because, it's vegan, it's healthy. So you got to look at what the building blocks in the body are. When I really, I really pushed towards carnivore nutrition when I realized how much protein somebody needs to build muscle. And muscle and bone have a synergistic relationship. So, even though I was past my days of bone density development, but I still consult on all the research projects, of which there are multiple ones going on at different universities, focused on the Osteostrong devices. It's the ones who respond the best are the ones that have the least inflammation and focus on driving muscle. The forerunner to my chapter in nutrition.
But aren't a lot of the phytonutrients found in plant foods anti-inflammatory?
So like antioxidants, let's start with antioxidants because we've been studying that for a long time. You don't need an antioxidant if you're not oxidizing. So the idea that I'm going to poison myself and then take the antidote too.
But you're breathing oxygen, right?
Is what?
You're breathing oxygen. So we have oxygen.
Right.
So
We did that for a different
it leads to oxidative stress. We know oxidative stress occurs in our system.
right, but the least amount would be, better.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know.
Probably the osteoclastic activity probably involves, because we have the osteoclastic balance that occurs in bone, where bone is being broken down and rebuilt. And I'm sure the osteoclastic activity probably involves, oxidative stress as part of breaking down the bone, but that's part of the growth as well, because you want to get rid of the bad bone.
Yeah, exercise is inflammatory.
Of course, exactly.
You can't avoid it all, but
very, very oxidative, very acidic.
Nutritional inflammatories become chronic because also people eat all the time. So I also recommend time restricted eating. So like I only right now I'm eating 5 meals in a week. So I do a 72-hour of no food period of time, three days. And then, I'll eat 1 meal a day the rest of the days. So, I go, look, nothing in my system. And that's to take down all the inflammation, allow autophagy to happen. I see my scars disappearing. I got a lot of scars, and they're metabolizing themselves.
Why do you have so many scars?
I guess I was part of that generation that rode motorcycles without helmets.
Oh, okay.
Trees and got a hold of the farm rifle, and maybe got hit with ejecting brass a couple of times and burned myself.
Okay.
I fully understand that. Yeah. Like fireworks, punch through a car window when a car rolled over. Like I was the Terminator, thinking that wouldn't cause any problems.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's one. You can probably see a little bit the scarring on my arm. My fraternity letters are branded into my deltoid. So very serious fraternity, very good fraternity too. So this is like, you could see when I first started X3 is like the only time I ever took pictures, with my shirt off. And then been doing that since then, but you can tell in the last 2 years that it used to have like a keloid on it. It was like sticking off of my skin like 0.5 millimeter. It's almost gone. And that's been there 20 years. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Jaquish, any final thoughts you have for our listeners, viewers?
Well, it depends. You know more about your listeners than I do. So what do you think that, I can tell them, are they all vegans, or, if they're going to be upset with me because I say carnivores. Do they look at their nutrition like it's a religion? Because that's not how you should look at anything. But, I'm not sure who all my viewers are. So, I know we have functional medicine practitioners, but we have educated viewers too. So, I'm sure there are vegans. I'm sure there's people who promote Mediterranean diet. I'm sure there's people who promote paleo or carnivore. I like the people who tell me that they're doing hybrid nutrition between, they're doing sort of keto and sort of Mediterranean. So they're told bread is great and so are fats. So they just eat pizza. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
One of the sad things about the internet is it's really shining the light on the fact that people want the news that they want. They don't want the news that's actually right. So with nutritional research, there are people who are furious with me because I tell them just stop eating sugar and carbohydrates. And you can apply carbohydrates in a very intelligent way when it comes to strength training, And, if you really want carbohydrates, that, the time is timed very carefully around your workout, and you can get away with it and actually grow more muscle. But, and I described that in the book, but did you read the hyperplasia section?
Yeah.
Yeah. I say that, and I get just hatred messages by usually chubby people with little baby arms. And, it's you should be looking for the right answer, not the right answer for your hunger. Because you've been following that one for a long time, and you're probably going to die a lot younger because of that. So there we are.
There you are. I thank you for the time you spent with us and providing us with some interesting perspectives on building bone and building muscle.